my job as a professor to always question everything. Is it a fascistic society, or is it the most liberal, egalitarian society you can possibly imagine? So let's go back to Triumph of the Will and this TV episode of Eye of the Beholder and Citizen Kane. What do these things have in common? When you go to the political extremes, they're not different directions. There's like a circle, right?
Horseshoe
so like
theory.
The extreme of meat down here.
Right. Hey everybody, I just want to say I sort of forgot to summarize the episode we talk about in this video, so if you aren't familiar with Eye of the Beholder, I do recommend you watch it before watching this video. Well, that's it, and we'll get to it, and I hope you guys like the discussion. Welcome everybody to a little discussion that I'm having right now with Professor David D. Perlmutter, PhD, correct?
Yes.
Okay, just making sure. I don't want to leave any stuff out. Professor Professor Perlmutter of Texas Tech, I believe it's Video and Communications Division, or did I get that wrong?
College of Media and Communication.
Media and Communications, I'm sorry. College of Media and Communications at Texas Tech. And you used to be dean as well, right?
Yeah. Now I'm teaching, and thank you for having me on. We connected because I saw a great video you did on another Twilight Zone episode, and I've loved the show. Believe it or not, I was born after the show. I know people may doubt that, but I did start watching the show when I was relatively young kid on reruns on television, and always was fascinated by it. And now I have a lot of fun talking to students about the show, showing maybe some clips from it. And I love getting these intergenerational reactions, and
right,
because generations are sort of like different countries. They have their own standards and values, and the way they look at something, and also the fact that maybe something was fresh and new to me watching the show in the late 70s, like this episode we're going to talk about. They may have seen it before in a meme, or they may have seen this type of a twist ending 30 times before. So it's just, I enjoy the discussion about culture, and I think you've set a great precedent on your show, so I'm just happy to be here.
Thank you so much. I just can't tell you how much I appreciate that.
I think it's one of those shows, The Twilight Zone, where you almost don't have to say the title of something. You can just say the episode where people are wearing masks, or the episode where the bomb hits and the guy breaks his glasses, and like that's it. What you said earlier was correct. Like, one of the wonderful things about the Twilight Zone, which is why I like to talk about it, especially as somebody who like studies culture, is it's got tranches. It's got many different layers.
Right.
You can peel off and have philosophical, military, historical, cultural discussions. By the other hand, they can be reduced to a sentence as like, oh yeah, that one, with that amazing, striking visual or reveal.
Exactly. And that's what you were talking earlier about, like, you watched it as a kid. I watched it as a kid as well. And you were talking about how some things maybe in retrospect or in modern time, kids would be like, well, I've seen stuff that's already kind of like that. Things that were inspired actually by the Twilight Zone. Well, I just want to go out right off the bat about the Eye of the Beholder. It's kind of obvious now. And it's like, I think anyone who watches it, it'll be obvious to them what the ending is going to be. That doesn't make it bad. You know what I mean? That doesn't ruin it. But I think most people are going to see it and go, oh yeah, I know. I mean, why would they not be showing everyone's faces? For those of you who don't know, Eye of the Beholder opens up, and immediately this woman is wrapped up. Her face is all wrapped up in bandages, and the nurse she's talking to is in shadow, and you don't see her face. So, not to spoil, not to immediately spoil it, but what are your thoughts on that? That, like, how that's changed now, this perception of the not seeing the faces?
Well, that's an interesting question about the history of culture, because you could argue that the stories that we tell, if you boil them down to essential elements, and not only like the plot points, but like the plot devices, like how a plot is revealed, are thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of years old. Like, whenever human beings, and I think there's controversy, for example, about whether Neanderthals could speak the way we speak. That there was an issue about some people had a theory that they couldn't do vowels because of the way their vocal cord. I don't know the current thinking of this. I have
Right.
behind me not picture zero, but this is one of the famous horses from the Lascaux cave that our ancestors painted somewhere 30,000 years
Right.
ago. And we can agree that's a horse,
Yeah.
right?
There's no argument. There's no
And
I need to
but we
interpret
don't
this.
know the how the horse was used. Did they tell a story about the horse? Was it like the horse that Grok killed that he insists on reminding everybody about how he killed? A lot of the horses, I wrote a book on the history of visualization of warfare, and I started out with hunting. And if I'm just going to move over here, sorry,
It's
you
all
can
good.
see as I like to tell my students, that is a really tasty, juicy looking horse. We don't think about eating horses today. Of course, there are people who eat horses, but like, man, if you were the hunter that killed that horse and brought that horse home, you talked about it for months afterwards because everybody had a feast for 2 or 3 days,
Right.
right? So we don't know when there was a generation that was surprised by a surprise ending, right? So, for
Right.
example, I growing up, I read a lot of science fiction, and I can tell you every single successful television and science fiction series, starting with for me with Star Trek, was using tropes, metaphors, allusions, ideas, plots that already existed in the world of print science fiction for
Right.
decades.
Right.
And
No.
science
Yeah.
fiction was often reusing things from horror and fantasy. And so you can go back in time. I do think today, talking to my students, there is no such thing as an average college student anymore, but let's just say the 18 to 20, classic 18 to 22-year-old, the Generation Z, Generation Alpha split there, um, they've they've been saturated not just by media because they may not have seen the films of Kurosawa, they may not have filmed the great filmmakers and the great television shows, but they've been memized and they've been clipized, right?
Mhm. And
So
in a sense, they've been. I mean, if you've seen Star Wars, you've kind of seen a couple. Like, you know what I mean? You've kind of seen the Hidden Fortress a little bit. You've kind. Yeah, so
yeah,
there's stuff like that.
yeah, and then they've seen these clips and they've seen media criticism like yours. I mean, media, huge. A lot of culture today is a bigger hit on YouTube critiques than it is
Right.
in the movie theater or on streaming. So what I'm saying is that they're very young, but they're very visually experienced, and so just taking what we're going to talk about today, the surprise twist ending, they're almost expecting it. Whereas the naive audience, a more naive audience like me in the 1970s, I do not remember whether I was surprised. There were two possible reveals that because this episode does start where you only see one or two of the main character in fully lighted, like you can see her face,
Right.
and she is, as people point out, an actress who is an conventionally beautiful
Yes.
woman.
Yes.
You
It's.
find
I'll
out.
point out. I'll point
Yeah,
out
she's the
real.
one who played Ellie Mae
Yeah.
in the Beverly Hillbillies. So the
Donna
people of the
Douglas.
yeah, Donna Douglas. So like she was a classic Hollywood blonde
She's
beauty in every
beautiful.
possible casting decision way. But so you see these other people in shadow, and I think my 10-year-old self had two theories based upon
Ooh.
previous science fiction that I'd watched.
Oh, this is
Theory
interesting.
number one was that, yeah, these are going to be revealed to be like hideous troglodyte dwarfs or something
They'll be
like that.
fish people. You said.
Yeah, something. I mean, I guess they were described as pig people in like TV Guide.
To me, they look like
But
fish people, but yeah, I
yeah,
understand.
that's
Fish, pig.
interesting because my generation called them pig people. I'm wondering
Oh,
whether
okay.
your generation calls them
I don't know what other people call them, but yeah.
icties. But the other theory was that the Earth has been taken over by aliens, and the aliens think we're hideous and wanted to transform the humans to look more like
Ah.
the aliens, and so they'll turn out to be reptiles or from Xantar or something like that. That's going to be the
Ah.
reveal.
Now
By
there's
the way, trademarked that plot, so if nobody in Hollywood can go steal that and have a
no.
movie.
I want to say, since you brought that up, there's two pieces of evidence that suggest that might be correct. One piece of evidence is at the end of the episode when Serling gives his narration. He basically says he literally says it doesn't matter where the story actually takes place.
Yes.
It could be anywhere. But he does say one of the things toward the end of it. He says, or maybe on a distant planet or like in a distant star or something like that. He says, and to me, the inflection of it or like the way that it's placed in the sentence, it feels like he might be suggesting that that's what he's saying. It's another planet. But then the other thing that's more important, and I'd like to get into this more later, the dictator character, who is called the leader, at one point in the original teleplay, I believe this was cut in the episode. He says that we shouldn't have any sentimentality about our past.
Right.
And he suggests that we've moved beyond that. So maybe the aliens, if your theory is right, maybe the aliens showed up and they've been slowly changing the culture of the planet, like they live or something like that. And at this point now, there are people that are still human and they're sticking around. It's annoying and they have to. I actually love that.
And it is interesting how in the edited version that we saw, you know more about the background than I do. The alien theory is still plausible.
Yeah.
I'm going to go on a tangent now, and you'll find it's maddening to talk to me because I'm an old man. I've got too much in my head. So
No,
I
go
remember reading about how Gene Roddenberry, because remember this episode appeared I think 1960. Star Trek is 67 to 69. So it's much earlier than Star Trek. And of course,
Yes.
William Shatner appears, right? But in his pitch to the network about that the show would be affordable to do, because somebody said like, oh my gosh, we're going to have like a monster of the week, and
Like Outer Limits.
Yeah, exactly. And he said, no, no, no. And then he started talking to them about parallel evolution. The idea that like life on other planets would end up pretty much looking like us because of the way evolution sort of bottlenecks development. And we're going to talk about beauty in a moment, about whether there's an evolutionary standard of beauty versus it's all culturally subjective. So that's another topic for later. That could be taken as a development of because how did these people? You think about like one of the great things about the Twilight Zone, among the great things, is that he doesn't bore us with a lot of exposition, right?
Right.
So like you think like, how did it end up this way? Was there some sort of war and there were mutant malformations?
Right.
And somebody decided, well, like, it's not fair that some people look like mutants, and then but over time, maybe over generations, the new standard of beauty and handsomeness, because there's a handsome male that appears later.
Yes.
This was the new standard of beauty, and that old standard of beauty, now that's ugly, right?
Right.
And which is, by the way, another reference, 1984, very 1984-ish, where we're told one reality and then the government changes its mind and we're told a completely new reality, and we're saying, okay, yeah, we'll switch over to the new reality. The episode opens itself up to a lot of speculation about like, how did we get here?
Absolutely. And it's very clearly a fascistic and or totalitarian society, but we don't know anything about how the gap was bridged. Like you say, I always just assumed it was a fantasy reality that had nothing to do with anything, but I like the idea that it's an alien reality. I think that's fun too.
It could be an alien reality. It could be a future human reality. You're right. I mean, we'll call yours the standard model, and I think it's probably right that this is a future evolution or an alternative. I mean, I guess there's three choices. This is an alternative Earth, right? This is a future Earth, and this is it's like there's a theory that the Flintstones and the Jetsons are occurring at the same time.
Yes.
It's after a nuclear war, and like the Jetsons are the elites living up in the sky, and the
I've
Flintstones.
Heard that.
I mean, nobody can prove that, but it is interesting to talk about this one, about how we got there, and let me go back because my job as a professor to always question everything. Is it a fascistic society or is it the most liberal egalitarian society you can possibly imagine?
Okay, so that's a good point. That's a good question because what the guy specifically says at the end is that it's like it's all one thing. It's all one people, one
Yeah,
faith, one.
yeah,
But it does expand in the original teleplay, and I guess just the fact that they put people in what you would basically call ghettos, and she calls them a ghetto. She calls it. Janet calls it a ghetto.
yeah.
The you would put these people in this group. I guess you're right that I'm not sure of the exact ideology, but the reason I say fascistic is because and this is all aesthetics. This is all aesthetics.
Right.
But the leader is obviously Hitlerian because he's doing the hand movements. Everything is hand movements
Yeah.
where it's all literal Hitler hand movements too. You can tell he took, but and the society in fascist Germany, just to make an argument. I'm no expert on it, but I do know that fascism, or at least the if you don't want to call them fascist, because people think Italy is the fascist one, but whatever. In Nazi Germany, there was a standard of beauty. Is that correct?
Yes, I mean there was I mean it's interesting to talk about that there were certainly within the public ideology an idealization of certain physical attributes. I mean, as people have pointed out over the years, practically none of the leaders of the Third Reich actually looked like
Yeah.
the the idealized.
There,
But you
yeah.
know, there's a phrase Hitler described like the ideal German youth as hard as iron and slim as greyhounds and he I don't think he in his public utterances mentioned the blonde, blue-eyed Aryan ideal that much, but if you looked at like, and I've read books on like art in the Third Reich, and I've written about photography in the Third Reich. Yeah, if you looked at like who were the movie stars and who were like the stars of like the war photos and the movie reels
There
and
was a
things like
standard.
that. Yeah, if you look at Triumph of the Will, which is a film, probably in my mind, the most powerful propaganda film and the most beautiful propaganda film. Those
It looks
things don't
great.
cancel each other out. Ever made. Leni Riefenstahl,
Yeah.
Nazi filmmaker, she made this film, Triumph of the Will, to introduce the world to Nazi ideology, and
Right.
she has all of these long, loving shots of young, uh, there's no other way to say it, Germanic ideal
Hmm.
youths
Yeah.
exercising and running around.
I saw
And
this
so,
when I saw this when I was
yeah,
younger, and like you say, it's a very well made film, and it's something that it's hard to admit that, but it's just like no, she was really good at making propaganda, and it's
yeah,
but the shots are so beautiful.
it absolutely, it's a perfect movie in terms of, I mean, again, remove
Proof.
evil and good
Yes.
don't play,
Yeah.
but there, but going back to this episode, so I want to go back to
I have more.
my
I have
counter
more
theory.
arguments. I have more
Yeah, go
arguments for.
ahead. Go.
But
Sorry,
go.
please. Yeah,
Well, also they use the word undesirables, which a lot of people associate with
yeah.
them. The state affords. I'm actually going to read the guy tells her at one point under certain circumstances the state does provide for the extermination of undesirables. So to me that felt very. You could say Italy too, but that felt very Germany, the way that they were like, if you're like an invalid or something, it's better to just kill you, right?
Yes,
That
and
was a
I think historically we need to point that out that before the mass murders of other groups began, Germany had a program where they systematically killed off hundreds of thousands of undesirable, mentally ill, people with congenital ailments, just hundreds of thousands of ordinary Germans
right,
who were unconnected to what were labeled undesirable groups, but they're just physically different. Like in
yes,
fact, you can see the propaganda about this is they show these people as horrible and ugly, and thus they must be killed. So
right.
there's no question this episode hints at all of that. Please go ahead.
Oh no, no, you're absolutely totally right. And I was just gonna say, like, it's suggested that the case is not severe enough for her to be killed for it,
Yeah.
that instead they put them in these ghettos and they
Although we
add.
would say it's pretty severe. Like Donna Douglas and the gentleman that's introduced later in the surprise, boy, they don't look like the fish pig people at all.
No, the guy at the end is so handsome. It's
Yeah,
crazy. It's they
yeah.
didn't want to pick just a human. He had to look handsome as hell, and he does.
The casting there now the other part, which I'm sure you know as well, is that there were actually two actresses
Yes.
who were playing the young
One
woman. They
for the
had Donna
voice.
Douglas for the physical appearance, and then they had another actress. I was looking her up there.
Yes.
Yeah, Maxine Stewart,
For the
who
voice.
who when she was in bandages, the voice. But they really wanted to go for like the ultimate beautiful woman and the ultimate beautiful man, and then but so in other words, I'm just saying that,
No, no,
like,
yeah.
if you believed that the fish pig people were like the standard of beauty, then
Yeah.
Donna Douglas, and I forgot the name of the actor who
They're
played
hideous.
men, they would be hideous within
Yeah.
that worldview.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It makes total sense.
yeah.
No, I actually love that.
As in, like, and remember the other thing that I think, gosh, I'm just so much to talk about.
There's
The people around them are not acting evil.
they're
They're
not
not
bad
saying,
people.
"Oh, those ugly people, they deserve to be killed."
No.
The doctors and the nurses are sympathetic. They're horrified. I mean,
Yes.
they literally, like, "Oh my gosh, I can't even look at how ugly this
The
person is."
the
But
main
they're not
doctor the main
mean.
doctor has a crisis of
Yes.
conscience at one point where he's basically saying like this is wrong, this system is wrong, or he's questioning it.
Yeah.
And the other girls basically like don't say too much, and this goes to the old, it's a totalitarian society of some kind. I don't know exactly what their ideology is, but when Janet, the main character, is kind of like unloading on the doctor saying this is so unfair, he says in the original teleplay, he says, I'm going to ask you to stop that kind of talk. And they cut that line, that exact line, and have everything else in the sentence, but that one line. And I think the reason that they cut it is because it makes it a little too obvious what it is.
Yeah, so let's go back to the genius of Rod Serling, right? Rod Serling, of course, wrote this episode as well as he
Right.
was the creator of the Twilight Zone. One of the reasons I love being a professor is that I love to get discussions going with students, and so I will often offer a contrary point of view that I may not necessarily agree with, but I think there's some evidence within the text. So
Right.
let me go back and say, what if this is a liberal democracy? There's no
And
fascism whatsoever, but it's the ultimate expression of all men are equal, of everybody is equal. Because let's talk about this.
okay, okay.
There has been research for many years, mostly within psychology, but sometimes within legal studies and other areas, that show that one of the most powerful prejudices that affect the job that you get, affect whether you're found guilty in court, who you marry, are your physical characteristics, how
Right.
other people think of you as good looking within the conventions
The
of
halo
society.
effect. The
That's
halo
right,
effect.
the
Yeah.
halo effect there. Basically, they found that, you show somebody and say this person's accused of murder, and here's the evidence. If they look like Brad Pitt, people start finding reasons why they probably didn't do it.
Yeah.
If they
Right.
look like me, they're thinking, God, he must be guilty.
Yeah. Exactly. No, I get you. Yeah. I couldn't
But
get away with a murder.
so let's park that data right there. So now, if a society wanted to get rid of everything that made people unequal, just like Ursula K. Le Guin, who was a liberal feminist, wrote
Right.
a novel called The Lathe of Heaven, in which she gets rid of inequalities by making everybody look alike. I'm extrapolating here a couple of things.
Right.
And Ursula K. Le Guin fans can come in and correct me, but that theme has been universal. It's not
Right.
just a fascistic theme
Right.
that everybody must conform.
No,
If
I'll agree with that.
conformity makes people more equal and thus makes a nicer society. If you look at the propaganda, which I have, of Nazi Germany, but also of Soviet Russia,
Mhm.
but you look throughout history. I mean, for example, I teach a class here on global communication. And one of the things I talk about is what in global culture is uniquely local, that is, you only see it in Azerbaijan, and what are cultural universals. So let's go back to Triumph of the Will and this TV episode of Eye of the Beholder and Citizen Kane. What do these things have in common? It is a cultural universal, which I believe is based on a biological universal. That if in photography or painting or film you want to make somebody look more powerful,
Oh,
you portray them from below,
yeah, yeah.
from a low angle.
He got that from
Well,
Stagecoach, actually. Orson Welles got that from John Ford's Stagecoach.
but I think it came from
Oh
cave
yeah,
paintings.
no,
I
it's
think
no, I agree. Yeah,
we are
exactly. It's
born
from
we are
right,
born small creatures who look up to powerful creatures for
right.
most of our childhood who control our destiny.
Filmmaking is
Yeah, yeah,
psychological.
yeah. So,
So
I
absolutely,
think
yeah,
that if you have a low angle in a 500-year-old piece of art from Indonesia, and you have a low angle in Citizen Kane, it's a universal language. It doesn't.
right,
It comes from biology.
right,
Whereas there may be things that go on today. I mean, there are things that are more Texasy, that are more California, right?
right.
There. So
As we've
so
established,
so here in this episode, I think Rod Serling was playing with and asking questions about whether making people equal
right.
was totalitarian or was, I mean, the extreme, when you go to the extremes, I've always said, when you go to the political extremes, they're not different directions. There's like a circle, right? So
Horseshoe
like the
theory,
extreme of meat down here,
right.
Soviet Russia killed millions of people. Nazi Germany killed millions of people. We could have a completely 500 separate episodes on like
People
who were the
call
bigger
it the
killers.
horseshoe theory. That they meet,
Yes.
and I had a lot of comments on the Twilight Zone video about It's a Good Life from, I'll just say it, from Nazis, from people who were like pro Nazis that were telling me like, no, you lied. That's not true. Actually, Germany didn't lose World War I. And I also had a lot of comments from what you call tankies who were saying, no, you lied. How could Stalin have done that? How could there was a lot of stuff like that. So it just shows you like they're like the same people and they talk the same pretty much too. And also, they both kind of hate Jews. Just throwing that out there.
Well, again, to me, it's a question of like your preferred ideological format rather than the content of the ideology. But
Right.
but just going to totalitarianism in this episode, let's just pretend,
It's aesthetic.
Galaxy Quest. Let's pretend these are historical documents
Right.
that we have discovered from some other planet or something, the long lost planet Earth, and we're 10,000 years in the future in
Exactly.
Dune times or something
And we're
like
studying
that.
this. Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And what we can say is these people believed in conformity, but equality is the flip side and the justification for conformity. Again, in this global
Right.
communication class, I show a picture of U.S. soldiers in uniform and Texas Tech football players in uniform. And throughout the world, when you build a civilized army or a civilized team, one of the first things you do to build team spirit is you give them a uniform so they
Right.
look alike. And in the
Right.
earliest pictures from the Neolithic and then from the era of the civilizations like Ur and Egypt and things, the Hittites, you start getting a standardized army,
Right.
and everybody's wearing the same uniform because it builds unit cohesion. It builds a feeling of equality. It builds the band of brothers spirit,
Right.
which I think has probably motivated soldiers for tens of thousands of years. So I'm just saying that the opposite of conformity is not freedom.
I agree with that. Hey guys, I hope you liked that discussion. That was part one. Part two will be coming out probably in a week or so. But if you want to see the entire thing, you can actually see it now, unedited, with a lot more clips in there that are not in part one or part two that you'll see here. And if you see this version, you'll get to see my face. If you want to see that, head over to my Patreon right now. For just $1, you get to watch this unedited version of the interview. Part 2 coming soon.